THA Talks, for free thought and open minds.
And for freedom of speech.
Hello, I'm Paulo Batelli and welcome to another edition of THA Talks, the alternative podcast show from the UK. Our talks include news, conspiracy, spirituality, the occult, science, history, art, philosophy, religion, and much more. If you'd like to check out our full archive, just go to www.thatalks.com to listen to or to download all our free content. And if there's anyone who'd like to contact us and give us some feedback, maybe you'd like to recommend a guest for the show, you can email us info@thatalks.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the show via our RSS feed, and you can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, and many other podcast directories out there. Well, hello everyone, thanks for tuning in again. I'd just like to remind you we're not far now from the International Conference for the Presentation of Invisible Master, the Puppeteer's Hidden Power. That's a conference by Leo Zagami and his forthcoming book. This conference is taking place on the 10th of February from 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. at St. Peter's Church in Clapham, London, SW4 6BX. We've had some talks with some of the speakers. Sasha Stone's been on the show, had a great chat. Jason Leosatos. Also, will be speaking at the show Simon Hinton on, still hoping to have a show. Been trying to get hold of Simon to come on the show before the conference. But it's going to be really enjoyable. If you would like to book some tickets reserved, I know they're going to be quite tight. I think it's only 80 people that the capacity can hold. And I'm not sure how many there is left. But if you do want to reserve a place, the tickets are going to be £20 each. And if you email me at the show, I can forward you details for where you can get tickets. So just email info@thatalks.com and I'll get a hold of that and I'll forward you on to someone that can help you. But yeah, that's going to be a cool event. Obviously, I'll be about doing some moderation, which I'm looking forward to. And there's going to be lots of interesting people about and it should be a good one. So on to today's show now. We're going to be speaking with John White again. John White hasn't been on the show for a long time. I've done a load of What's News editions with John White. He's been off doing all sorts of different projects and stuff that's been keeping him really, really busy. Some of it he's talked to us about on the show. We've got some subjects he'd like to go into today, but we're also going to obviously catch up with him because it's been a while. I'm pleased to have him back on the show, and it's not going to be the last time. He's been a regular, and he's going to continue to be a regular, and he's here with us right now. How are you doing, John?
Good evening, Paul. Hello, THA. Oh, it has been a while, hasn't it? Oh, it's about 6 months since I last spoke to you.
Yeah, I mean, it has. I mean, I know you're always busy anyway. You get stuck into things. You get really passionate and put all your energy into it, and so, you did say to me when I started bringing you on the show that, you'd come on as and when you could. And I think the last 6 months has been very busy, but I've always said you're always welcome to come back on. We'll do some more What's News shows. But, people have been wondering where you are. So what you've been up to the last 6 months?
I would have to say, the last time we spoke, I was speaking about this information that I ran into and this plan that seemed to be getting set up. I have to report, unfortunately, that did not pan out. And I've basically found that small party politics and philosophy doesn't mix that well.
Right.
Because you come to a point where maybe as a philosopher, then you're more interested in a higher point of principle, but small party politics are interested in the interests of a small party, and you can get conflicts there. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. And also, the plan that I gave my support to was on the basis that there would be an electoral alliance, which was due to launch last September. This fell through. It was rejected by the Electoral Commission. And with where we are at the moment, Brexit is less than about 58 days away, I think, right now. And we're looking at a hard Brexit happening. We're looking at a very high probability that we're going to have a general election this year. So without there being an electoral alliance, it's pretty hard to support a party which plan depends on there being an electoral alliance. So we'll have to look at the political field. I mean, I now run my group, Aslans Army, which is the good thing which has come out of all this, Paul. Is been on this journey. I'm guiding a community with my helpful fellow admin of about 5,000 people.
You're right.
So Aslans Army is on Facebook. Aslans Army is on MeWe. We are on Twitter a bit, but I mostly just tweet from my own account on Twitter, because I mostly use Twitter as a way to get at people. Not in a bad way, but in a good way. Okay. So if you want to talk to the opinion formers and the opinion shapers, Twitter's a very good way to get straight to them.
And just to clarify, you're still very much on the side of the man with a plan. You're still firmly behind Q, is that right?
Oh yes, we've got no problems with Q. Everything's holding straight with Q. I mean, it's looking very good at the moment. But I mean, that's a complicated program in its own right, of course. What exactly is going on with Q? But it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. Obviously, in the last month or so, we've really seen Trump and the showdown of the Democrats come into full play over the wall and the shutdown of the US government to try and strong-arm the Democrats to agreeing to this. What I will say about this is a lot of people misunderstand this situation because they think it's about $5 billion in building a wall across America's southern border. It is not. Yes, it is, but no, it's not.
Yeah.
What it's really about is what is happening on that southern border and the vast amounts of criminal enterprises that are using that border, people travelling, drug smuggling, arms, MS-13 gangers, and then where are these people going as they're coming into the United States illegally? They're going into Democrat stronghold areas. So who do Democrat politicians have deals with? They have deals with the gangs. They have deals with the people smugglers. There's a lot of money involved, and building a wall will stop that criminal enterprise and therefore directly impact on the cabal, stroke the Democrats, actual power base. So it's not about $5 billion and building a fence. It's about destroying the power base of a globalist clique, which of their agenda is to undermine America as a nation. So pretty serious stuff, and Trump's going to win anyway, because they either negotiate or he gets his wall built by the military, and that's exactly where we are.
It seems quite strange because you've got this Pelosi and the other chap's name. What's the other chap's name? Nancy Pelosi and Schumer, yeah. And they're kind of passionate about stopping. I mean, it's not a great deal of money considering he's got quite a strong mandate, Trump, to do this. You'd think they'd be smart and think, well, look, if we let him build the wall, then we might even win some of his voters over. But they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot, making a big fuss about this. Just let him build his wall. That's what he was voted in to do,
Well, look, $1 trillion is $1,000 billion, right? America's national debt, I haven't got the right precise figure, but the last I heard it was dropping around somewhere around 19 to 20 trillion. So that's 19 to 20,000 billion. I think they can find $5 billion for a fence if they really want to.
Yeah.
It's not about the money. It's not about the money. But with a government shutdown as well, there's other aspects there because rather like the United Kingdom, the United States has got a very bloated civil service. And most of them could fairly be said to be passing the time and not really doing very much. So, there are, rather than how much does government cost, there's a hell of a grounds for taking a huge axe to government, maybe chopping off 80% of it. And you could say the same in Britain. We could reduce the civil service by 80% and we'd have no loss of efficiency. Sorry to say, a lot of the functions which are carried out by bureaucracies can be done better by software these days.
Okay, well, there was before we move on to a topic that you wanted to particularly address today earlier on when we were speaking, just to cover kind of like the Q Trump thing. Do you think when we're looking at Brexit at the moment, particularly the characters like Nigel Farage and the populists around there, if you remember a while back, Steve Bannon came over and he was talking about a pan-European alliance. Since then, you've got Farage, who's kind of playing this very tactful, safe sort of way of playing things and distancing himself from other people, but at the same time, very much involved, talking about a political party, making friends with Rees-Mogg. Can you see something like that? There's some kind of underground new party movement. It feels that way, doesn't it?
We've had a lot of changes in the last 4 months, especially. Actually, I would say that if you were looking for a new underground party that had a serious shot at power, that party is probably UKIP now. And the reason I would say that is, we've followed UKIP for quite some time. I don't know if you ever chucked them a vote, Paul, but I certainly did. Right, and since obviously Farage quit pretty much immediately after the Brexit referendum, but before that referendum, Farage and UKIP had really been distant from each other for well over a year.
Yeah.
So we could almost say that Farage moved away from UKIP in the form that it was in after the 2015 general election. He didn't really have much to do with UKIP after that. Now, because he quit, there has been a whole succession of different leaders. Each trying to appeal perhaps to slightly different people inside the party. That's all come and gone. And this time last year, UKIP was in a right mess under Badger Throttler Henry Bolton, who was just a disaster as a party leader. And, you know, he was endorsed by Farage. Now, my concern in the summer was that the UKIP NEC was very much under the domination of the UKIP donors, who, of course, many of them are Tory donors. And a case could be made, in fact, the case that I did make was that as long as these Tory donors had control of UKIP because they could threaten to take their money away at any time because they set it up that way, the chances of UKIP becoming a populist party were looking pretty limited. Now, I wasn't sure how I felt about Gerard Batten at that time. And I wondered if he was really in on the same sort of polarity, that more of a sort of a Tory sheepdog rather than a party that wanted power in its own right. I wasn't sure where he stood. And when he started to do a turn up at the Tommy protests, when Tommy was in jail in the summer, I was very cynical about the amount of money that UKIP were taking off that. But I have to give credit where it is due, Paul. Since that time, we have seen Batten stand by Tommy. We have seen Farage threaten to get Batten thrown out of the leadership. He then went to he said as much on air, live on NEC. I said on LBC, I'm going to go down with UKIP NEC and sort this out, he said. What happened? Farage out on his arse. Farage's mates out on their arses too. So at the moment, if you want a populist, democratic party with a hunger for government, UKIP's come a long way in the last 12 months. Now, I'm not saying it's the only option, but it's certainly out there at the moment looking strong. Meanwhile, Farage's party, what's it going to be, Paul? You see, I mean...
It's a strange one.
To me, Farage has always represented the middle class to upper class populist patriotism, whereas Tommy Robinson very much is the working class populist patriotism. And Farage's attitude to Tommy was really, really intolerant and quite hostile, actually. Quite really don't want to go there. So I think it's pretty obvious that Farage has always felt that Middle England was the key to UKIP's power.
Yeah.
But perhaps that's changing. And perhaps when the Tories change Theresa May, they are certain to go for a Brexiteer. So if you've got a Tory Brexiteer that they can believe in, and you've got UKIP as a genuine working class populist party, what's Farage's new party needed for again? You know,
maybe he's just trying to.
If you're the sort of person who's going to vote for their money, if you're voting on economics, if you're voting on your house prices and inflation rates and that sort of business, you're a natural Conservative voter anyway. So could it be that It's more an issue that Farage isn't going to be allowed into the Tory party. But this party has been applied to be named by the Electoral Commission. And this is another little thing, actually, that perhaps is interesting, because this plan I was helping the last part of last year were involved applying to the Electoral Commission to form an electoral alliance. Now, that alliance was due to be called the Brexit Alliance. And the Electoral Commission rejected it because they said the Brexit vote has already happened, so it would be confusing. Therefore, why would they allow Farage a party name of the Brexit Party, which is apparently what he's applied for? And this isn't cleared past the Electoral Commission yet. So there isn't actually a Nigel Farage party to vote for. I don't know why he doesn't stand as independent. Really?
Well, I mean, it's almost like there's a bit of 3D chess going on with all this, because it's like his views are exactly the same as UKIP still. They haven't changed, but he's just making out that they're the bad guys. So if you make UKIP the bad guys...
yes and no, because maybe they have, because apparently the problem is this issue about UKIP's policy on Islam. But I remember back in, 2010, when it was Farage that was pushing the ban the burqa policy.
Well, that's it. Exactly.
I mean, you remember that, don't you? He did. He went there.
I mean, listen to this. I mean, this is recently. We all know what happened with the Anna Soulbury and Owen Jones, where they absolutely snowflake. Well, recently, I've got a clip of it now. I'm going to play it. It's what Jerry Batten had to. And this Muslim guy was being very threatening, like very hostile towards. Have a listen to this, and we'll comment on it.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Batten, can I just ask you one question?
You'll have to be quick, so I want to get out of the
Because I'm Muslim, and I'm really upset by what you've been saying about Muslims. You said our prophet is a paedophile, a sex offender. Why do you say that?
What do you call a 52-year-old man who has sex with a 9-year-old?
So you're an expert on Islam, are you?
What do you call,
Have you read the Quran?
What do you call a 52-year-old man?
So I'm a Muslim, and you're insulting my prophet. I'm standing 2 feet away from you.
So what?
And you don't mind doing that?
I've described to you an act.
See, you just insulted all the Muslims.
No, I haven't.
3 million Muslims in this country, because that's our prophet.
No, I haven't.
Do you think Muslims are compatible with non-Muslims in this country?
I haven't insulted you. I've made a statement about historical.
What do you know about Islam? Have you read the Quran?
Did
do you speak Arabic?
Did a 52-year-old man have sex with a 9-year-old or not? Did he or didn't he? Did he or didn't he?
I'm not sure because I'm not as knowledgeable as you. Don't get run over now. But what right do you think you've got to insult Muslims? And you don't know anything about Islam or Islamic history. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me. Get your hands off me.
And how do you say get your hands off me? And then
Get your hands off me. I don't put my hands on anybody. You should educate yourself about Islam and Muslims before opening your big mouth.
Well, that's angry stuff, really angry stuff, just because he's having his religion questioned and picked at. This, don't get run over now. That to me was very, very hostile stuff. Telling him not to open his big mouth, and it was being quite aggressive to him. And then you compare that to Anna Soulbury and Owen Jones, and I don't even think it compares. And there's been nothing said about it. Nothing.
In many ways, I'm a more moderate man than other people, because I would say that criticising a religion in that very specific way isn't necessarily the best way to criticise Islam as a religion, right? Because it does needle, yeah. But at the same time, this is a free society. He's got a perfect right to say that. Batten, I mean, and people have got a perfect right to read that book and go, well, according to the text, this is what happened, and no, I don't like it. Now, I mean, we're talking about a society 1,400 years ago. I know in various parts of the world it hasn't moved on that very much. I mean, it's very difficult to take social rules from men and apply them through a modern lens. I mean, in the Middle Ages, we had English girls would be getting married at young ages, maybe not 9, but certainly 12, 13, well past time to start looking for a husband. So rules do change. But in terms of the modern world, I think that is something Islam does need to address.
Well, this is just it, isn't it? It's not so much that we're sort of saying that everything now this is what Islam is and it's really bad. There seems to be so little willingness to at least address these and say, you're right, we need to change this a little bit, because Christians have done it. Christians have moved on a lot and have
Christianity
changed.
has been through numerous reformations throughout history, which is basically, a reformation is when the rules get updated to modern times. There's no end of stuff that Christians simply ignore in the Bible, because it's not what the Bible means to them today. But it's not hard to go find somebody with a Mickey-taking text about the Old Testament, taking the whip out of all the different forms of sexism, slavery, and other forms of intolerance or whatever you can find in that book. So, it's the nature of humanity and the nature of narratives, that these things evolve, religions evolve, and Islam as a whole has movements to make. I'm far more concerned with women's rights, Sharia courts, the effect of a burqa, and the effect of things like female genital mutilation. I'm far more concerned with Salafists and Wahhabists preaching in mosques and in study groups outside of mosques. I'm very concerned about the 3,000 plus on a permanent watch list by the security forces. And I want to know when we're going to get a British government which is going to deal with mounting extremism in British society, because it isn't compromised by having used those very extremists as mercenaries for our foreign policy goals in Syria and in Libya. Absolutely. So, there's a lot to do. And a lot of it is to do with the guilt of our establishment and how they have used Islamic extremism for foreign policy goals. And we can also look at it and go, well, we have an elitist establishment, and that by encouraging mass Muslim immigration into Britain, and by introducing, increasingly legalising against what they call Islamophobia, this is actually a form of social irritant to keep the working class arguing amongst themselves. And I think there's a very legitimate case could be made for that. But there are decent people who are Muslims, and we need to be connecting with those people, not alienating them. The worst thing that could happen is for there to be a blanket reaction against Islam throughout society, so that Muslims become shunned and within society, because then that would allow the extremists to turn to the moderates and say, see, they will never accept you, now you have to stand with us. And the reason I'm concerned about that, Paul, is that is exactly what ISIS has done in country after country. So that's the biggest risk of all.
I totally know.
It's throwing the whole baby out of the bathwater. Yeah. But, that's getting back to UKIP's policy. There are social concerns about Islam, and UKIP is prepared to actually say we've got some policies that will address those. Whether they're the right policies or not, that's what the social debate should actually be about. But at the moment, we're still in a situation where we're not having that social debate because it's being hidden behind walls of political correctness.
Yeah. The thing is, I think with when it comes to Muslims, absolutely, you're right. There are some very good Muslims, a lot of people out there. And they probably can relate to a lot of what people are talking about. It's
exactly the same way. But there are good people who are Christians.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think the only thing is, what I'll say is I do think there isn't enough fire from normal Muslims. I don't know what it is. It just seems maybe it's the media. Maybe the media just doesn't show it, and I'm happy to accept that might be the case. But it just seems even the moderate Muslims, a lot of them are happy to stay quiet. And the only thing that really bugs me is whenever there's a terrorist attack or if there's a new grooming gang that's been exposed or whatever, the first thing is always to defend the religion rather than to address the problem and to how to stop it and stuff.
Well, okay. I mean, the establishment doesn't want the public becoming radicalised against the whole religion for exactly the reason I've just given you, and other reasons. But at the same time, I agree. It really doesn't help. It really doesn't help us get to the bottom of this. But then when you really boil it down, it means the authorities are going to have to answer to people for why they have not acted against the extremists. And that's awkward. That's very awkward.
When it comes to grooming gangs, okay, perhaps these people are completely and utterly misunderstanding texts, and it's created a really ugly culture that doesn't or shouldn't really relate to Islam. Okay, but then let's address that. Pick out the texts that you think they're misunderstanding. Let's talk about them. Let's correct them. But they're not even that. That's what I don't see, and that's what worries me. There should be there's a lot of people that could do that. Just let's put these texts on the table and say this is what people are complaining about. And yes, it might be problematic. We're here to make sure that it's not problematic and to try and re-educate the nutters not to think. There's not enough of that going on, and that's what worries me. As I said, maybe it's the media. I don't know. I just don't see it, and we need to start seeing that. And if we do, maybe some of these moderate Muslims will start supporting a bit more of the Tommy Robinsons, Anne-Marie Waters, UKIP, all these people that are worried about it.
There is such support, bizarrely enough. I mean, it may not be large, but it is there, and there's also larger support in other ethnic communities. And I'm particularly thinking about Sikhs there, who have a strong streak of patriotism.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's the boiling pot continues to bubble, Paul. I mean, we've been fortunate we haven't had any ISIS attacks for a while. You hear me touching the wood,
yeah.
That has helped. Whereas if we'd have had a string of successful attacks throughout 2018, like we had previously, the pressure would have been building up more. But it's more ugly on the continent than it is here, particularly in countries like France, Sweden, Germany, who've had so many coming in as illegal migrants, and really dramatically changing the culture in small areas. And that's when there's a real risk of some kind of radical takeover, Paul. It's not that we can say, radical Islam is 10% of Islam and there's so much Islam spread evenly across Europe. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
When you have key cities and it becomes focused in key cities and start to take over political process, start to change ordinances, start to impose rules like no alcohol, for example, you start to get some serious social change. There's cafes in Paris which are run by Moroccan migrants. Women aren't allowed in there. In the middle of Paris, sexual segregation is being introduced.
There's a difference between mass immigration and multiculturalism and just normal. I'm not against immigration as long as it's controlled. It's a cliche to say it, but I don't believe in multiculturalism. I think it's just a way to kill host culture. You shouldn't have multiculturalism. Those who emigrate or move to another country should adapt to that culture. It should be one culture. If you don't like the culture, you move to another country to another culture. It's not a case of immigration. It's a case of maintaining British culture, values, culture, and the way of life. And this is what's creating the problem.
Absolutely, values. It is everything.
Yeah.
I mean, what's the point of having an ideology if it's a fake? Because your values aren't there to really uphold it. What's the point of supporting a political party or a movement or a cause if your values aren't in line with it? It's not going to produce anything decent and strong and stable, which is going to take society forward. I mean, might be a bit of egoism in it, perhaps. Think of a big I am by acting in that way. But values is everything, and that is what my group Aslans Army is 100% focused on, Paul, is our values, and that our values and our words and our actions align with each other. Because if we can achieve that as individual campaigners, and if we can then work with other campaigners and we're all on a sound foundation, we might be able to get somewhere. So that's the general basis. But values really do matter. Really do matter. I mean, I was reading the other day that Conservative MP, Caroline Dinenage, I think her name is, Dinenage, I may have got that pronounced wrong, but she's the MP for the Gosport area. I actually was in Gosport for a while, So I actually did correspond with her about a problem with refugees, and she was very good. And she wrote to the minister twice for me. So she really went above and beyond. She voted Remain. She supported Remain in 2016, but she now wholly stands by the Brexit vote. That's what we're talking about with values.
Yeah.
Where the party line, the party policies, or the pressure for me to sell out to the EU doesn't win over doing what is right because it's right. And in a democracy, because democracy is effectively a form of codified civil war, because democracy is war by other means. It's really so important that we respect democratic verdicts, because if we don't, we risk abandoning that form of warfare. And then where do we go from there? If we can't solve these things out in the democratic battle of ideas, then it becomes a battle on the streets, and then people are going to start losing their lives.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So this is why principles matter. This is why it matters.
It goes back again to the Islamic thing. I mean, it's not just a case of Muslims doing this or doing that, or not doing this and doing that. We're looking at our establishment, our government. Everything that they seem to be doing at the moment seems to be irritating British people and complementing a kind of a Sharia law type of thing. From Ferrari girls being banned, Formula One girls being banned, and the darts girls, I think they're been talking about banning them and stuff, to underground, fat shaming commercials being banned, halal meat, halal products spreading across the UK. It just seems to be, everything seems to be complementing that kind of Middle Eastern
It's
culture.
almost like we are being fed a designed culture, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. And it's not complementing us. It's complementing everyone else but us. And this is what's getting under people's skin.
Of course it is. So perhaps this is a good time to bring in the other topic I really want to talk about tonight.
Yes.
If you think we've done enough of a scoot about, what I really want to talk about tonight is what I call the culture war. Now, do you watch science fiction programs at all, Paul, or films or anything like that? Do you watch superhero films or sci-fi films?
I mean, I tend to sci-fi, I think, because that's where you get a lot of creative truths that come through sci-fi. So I'm always intrigued by it, and who writes the story and stuff, because it's a good way of projecting.
Have you noticed, like some people have, a certain agenda coming through the movie and television industry increasingly in recent times? Have you noticed that?
Fundamental third wave feminism rammed down everyone's throat, and identity
stuff.
politics.
Yes, that stuff. Yeah. Would you, God help you, have seen any of the most recent series of Doctor Who?
I haven't actually. No, I haven't seen that, but I've.
You did yourself a favour, Paul. I don't think you liked it. But equally, did you watch the last Star Wars film, The Last Jedi?
This is number 9 or 8. Are you referring to?
8. Yeah, number 9's at the end of this year.
Sorry, number 7 or 8. I did see number 8, but I thought it was awful, to be honest with you. I didn't. It
was really awful, wasn't it? Yeah, it was really awful. And of course, there's also this new Star Trek series, Star Trek Discovery, which has gone very much the same way. So, what I'm saying here is that, especially since 2016. There has been an agenda to politicise mass popular mythological entertainment, and I've been watching this for quite some time. And since the start of this year, I have become more deeply involved. So I'm now supporting a movement called #NotMyDoctorWho. Now, note, not my doctor. We're not focused on how dare you make Doctor Who a woman. That's terrible. How dare it shouldn't supposed to be a woman. Women are bad. That's not it. Not my Doctor Who, meaning the whole program, from his writing to the producing, to the direction, to the art design, to the costuming, to the lighting, to the everything, and of course the acting. So it's about critiquing the whole program. And at the same time, out there in the internet is not my Star Trek, not my Star Wars, and probably the most important hashtag of the lot going around, the fandom menace. So we are seeing a revolution in popular culture with grassroots audiences rejecting this agenderizing through the actual shows themselves. And that's a remarkable thing. And it's catching the studio system completely by surprise, because what we're seeing is that this is starting to have major impacts. And when the BBC obviously owns the license to Doctor Who and licenses a production company to make it for them, they were making, at the height of David Tennant's popularity, they were making £100 million a year from Doctor Who, Paul. So these franchises are big money. It's not just the episodes and the DVDs, but it's the comics, and it's all the collectibles, and then it's all the bedding sets and things like that. This stuff really adds up.
What seems to be when you talk about like Doctor Who, and this is the same thing like with Ghostbusters, Star Wars, is the issue with it is and there seems to be, I mean, a lot of the fanatical feminists, they'll say that you're being misogynist if you get annoyed the fact that it's a woman, as if it's bad to you don't like a dominant female figure. Quite the contrary. I think most guys are actually quite I think it's really hot to have a real strong female. It's most guys' fantasy to have a girlfriend like that. All right. Well, I think it wasn't my day. But the thing is, what's happening is, it's not a case of people are creating these strong female characters. They are turning male figures into female or to something else. They're taking, particularly the white straight male, is being taken out and replaced all the time. And this is what's putting people's noses out of joint, because they're just basically thinking it's not about the woman being there. It's about you're taking something away. That's the real issue, Sorry, carry on.
Well, absolutely, Paul. I mean, you're right. I mean, as you correctly identified it as this radical, extreme feminism. Now, what all of these studios have done is quite how it's come to pass is an interesting one, in terms of, did it happen kind of organically because people were getting programmed with these values who were then starting to move into the industry, so that slowly over the course of a decade or so they became the dominant values inside the industry? Or is there another level of agenda towards it, in terms of directly trying to socially engineer people towards globalist attitudes as quickly as possible? You can look at it in different ways, right? But what we can say with certainty is that you're absolutely right. This is what has put people's backs up. I mean, with Jodie Whittaker, the actress who's currently playing Doctor Who, I mean, I struggle because I just don't relate her with Doctor Who. I see an image of her in her Doctor Who costume. I don't see Doctor Who. I've never had that with the other actors, and it is to do with the performance, not her gender, because we've had other examples of strong females in Doctor Who. Just the last season, the Master became a female character called Missy, and all the fans loved Missy. So it isn't the being female which is an issue. And you can go back in all these sci-fi franchises. I mean, look at Star Trek. Star Trek was the first franchise to make a woman the lead 22 years ago with Captain Janeway in Star Trek Voyager. So it's not as if these franchises haven't been featuring women or haven't been progressive socially but they haven't been aggressively progressive. And I mean, it's no accident that Doctor Who has a rainbow plastered across her chest. But what's happened is that by following this agenda of trying to ditch the old fans and replace them with new fans, they brought in people who are committed activists for LGBTQ or other things like that. But to them, They're not watching the programme because it's Doctor Who. They're not watching the programme because they like Doctor Who or they know a lot about Doctor Who. Some of them do, but many of them don't. It's about what the programme means to them and how the programme is reinforcing their core identity. So they have effectively become fanatic supporters. But the problem for the actual show itself is that these new fanatic supporters are no more than 5% of the audience. And what we could tell by looking at sites like Rotten Tomatoes, where the audience figure for Doctor Who has crashed down to about 28%, whereas the critic figure is up at 95%. There's huge disparity, and we see that in the other franchises as well. These huge disparities between audience figures and critic figures tell you that something socially agenderizing has been going on in this franchise. Because why would critics and audiences see things in such dramatically different ways? Whereas if you look at a film which has not had that level of aggressive agendering in it, like the recent Aquaman, the audience figures for Aquaman, critics and audience are about the same. So there's very strange cultural effects have been going on, but the backlash is huge. Sorry, Paul, were you going to say something?
No, that's I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah. So, but it becomes then about a bottom line. I mean, we continue to talk about Doctor Who. As I said, the BBC makes a lot of money out of it. But if you're new fanatic fans of 5%. 25% of people don't seem to be all that fussed. They don't take it that seriously anyway. It's all right. They never really watched it as anything else from superficial entertainment. They're not looking for the deeper stuff in there. Whereas that leaves 70% of the hardened Doctor Who fan base, the people who buy the DVDs, go to the conferences, buy the extra merchandise, and put millions of pounds in the BBC's pockets every year, are in open rebellion against the programme. And it's the same in Star Wars, and it's the same in Star Trek. The new Star Trek Discovery series looks unlikely to get a third series at the moment. Because although it looks fantastic, and it does, Paul, it looks fantastic, the stories are absolutely awful, and any sense of rational following the rules of the universe has been abandoned, So you start to get ridiculous notions like sonar in space, but sound waves don't travel in space. And why would you use sound as a carrier for anything anyway? Because it's about the slowest signal you're going to get. Even if it did travel through a vacuum. So, I mean, I know it's always been a degree of fantasy in a warp drive doesn't exist. But if you look at what was it part of the original Star Trek Enterprise, if you watch the original series in the 50s, or 60s rather, when those doors swoosh open, that's a couple of guys hauling them open because they didn't have the technology to make doors open just because someone walks near them. Or flip open the communicator, the mobile phone, So in many ways, these shows have pointed the way. And I think it's that capacity to point the way for society, which has meant that this SJW cult has targeted these franchises to try to take them over. But this, as a philosopher, this speaks to me in terms of the core themes of human society being based around narrative and story. Now, let's take a character like Captain Kirk, for example.
Yeah.
Captain Kirk is a strong, dynamic, alpha male leader, who takes immediate control of a situation, who has authority, whose orders are listened to and respected, and who also has charisma and charm and a way of the ladies.
He's the daddy. He's the daddy, basically.
Kirk, isn't he? He's the daddy, yeah. Well, what if Captain Kirk became a soy boy cuck who couldn't decide to do anything without having a committee meeting?
Well, that would be good because then you'd be getting rid of toxic masculinity, wouldn't you?
Would, I suppose, But what if the same thing happens to Luke Skywalker? And what if the same thing happens to Doctor Who? And all of these heroic archetypes, who are being fundamentally undermined, who are being turned into fakes of themselves, and which are then being sold to a new generation of fans who are getting a completely different idea. And what you see very strongly is collectivism, especially in Doctor Who, whereas instead of leading her own show, the new version of Doctor Who can't do anything without 3 companions. And it's often the companions who are having the ideas that solve the situation, not the Doctor. So it's really changed what the series is about. It is this collective groupthink, group decision. No individual extraordinary heroes anymore. These are very much the kind of narrative themes of these false versions of the stories. But the good news is that this backlash is winning. It's having dramatic impacts.
Well, yeah, I mean, people are certainly. It used to start off with, and people were, the social justice warriors and the globalists. They're just sort of tease and say, "Oh my God, they're complaining about a film." But it's just gone on so much now, and more people. It's just a bit difficult not to deny it. But it gets to the point, someone is retired or something. You think, it's either going to be a woman. It has to be an identity change to sort of say, we can't have too many white males and stuff. Whereas white males, we're 85%, well, white people, 85% of this country. Of course, there's going to be. You'd expect there to be more white people or white males or straight people, and in particular roles where it's an aggressive kind of very aggressive.
It's almost like the white male has become the token character.
Absolutely, yeah, and which is.
I mean, I don't really think that we should be looking at these things in terms of what's the skin colour of a character. It should be about who's the right character for the story.
Absolutely, yeah, that's it. This is just it, though. I don't think that white people or white males have gone, we need a white person for this. I think it's just there's just been more white actors because it's England and there's more white people, and it's just played that part out. On the other end of the coin, the liberals or whatever you want to call them, progressives, globalists, social justice warriors, they actively really care about what race or what sex. They're the most sexist and racist of all.
Only the racist people see race, don't they, Paul? That's
in the past, if there's been a black actor, it's not bothered me at all. As if they're good, I used to love Eddie Murphy and all these kind of people. Great.
It's just an actor.
Yeah.
But it's when the people making the show are choosing that actor because they've got ideological reasons behind it. It's not really the actor's fault. Well, maybe some of them are into it. I mean, but you can't blame an actor per se. They're just trying to do a job.
That's it.
And at the end of the day, they have to deliver the lines that are scripted. So it's actually in the production of the scripting that the real genderising is being done. But when you look at someone like Jodie Whittaker, I mean, it's very telling that neither Chris Chibnall, the current producer, the new producer of Doctor Who, or Jodie Whittaker have a presence on Twitter, because I could tell you what would happen if they did. But when Jodie's been doing interviews, she's actually been speaking about the white man's patriarchal gaze and other things like this, suggesting that she's become the Doctor to put right some great social wrong over the last 55 years. You can imagine how that's annoyed people.
Yeah.
So
I haven't seen it, but I'm also assuming that most of the roles of the men they're really klutzy, stupid, as if they haven't got brains, or they're stupid, or they're irresponsible, always making mistakes.
Men in Series 11 of Doctor Who all stand at the back with their hands in the pockets for the most part. There is one character which has gone down well with the fans, which has been Bradley Walsh's portrayal of a middle-aged white man called Graham. And Graham has been really loved by the fans, actually, because he seems to be above this social justice nonsense. But he's not really there in a way to sort of put the other view. He's just kind of passively not into it, But at least fans have responded to him and actually liked him. But the other two characters, one's called Yaz, is a Pakistani female police officer, and the other's called Ryan. He's a black British mechanic, basically. I think is what the backstory is. But they've been very badly fleshed out. I think the Ryan character has been a little bit better, but the Yaz character does come across as total tokenism. So there's a lot of problems. A lot of people are very unhappy with that.
I'll tell you a series I saw recently, because I don't really watch a lot of TV, purely because a lot of it is politically crap out there. Political crap out there, basically what we're talking about. But now and again I do have a week or so where I indulge in something, and I did actually watch a series called Cobra Kai that you can watch it on YouTube, like a YouTube special they've got there. And this is actually a sequel to Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid. It's got the two original, the blonde head fella, I forgot his name now, and Danny. They had that big fight in the first one and stuff. It's them when they're grown up as adults. And it's actually brilliant, and it sort of bypasses all the PC stuff, and actually it touches on it a lot in quite a comical way, and very balanced. I think they're quite fair. They're sort of quite balanced with it, and so check that out, people. Cobra Kai.
Well, Cobra Kai has been a runaway hit.
Yeah, it's you can see it for free on YouTube if you subscribe for a month.
It's signs of this pushback taking place. But I mean, we've got to the point where these corporations are getting hurt very seriously in the pocket. It started with Ghostbusters 2016, which it was actually supposed to be a Ghostbusters 3 involving the original cast handing it on to a new generation. But there was a female producer that certainly didn't like that idea very much, so she gave the project to another director called Paul Feig, who's pretty much well known for being a man hater. He doesn't like men very much, and it was he then resculpted Ghostbusters 3 into an all-female new cast, and it's a reboot. So so in other words, the previous films don't exist in that universe. Well, this film was always going to have a lot of problems. One, for making the dramatic changes. Two, for not being a direct sequel. But then in the hype, and of course 2016 was when Donald Trump was taking on Hillary Clinton in the race to become president of the United States. It got so bad that the left-wing media got behind this film so much that if you didn't go and see Ghostbusters, you were effectively a de facto racist sexist. Now, it didn't work for them because Ghostbusters 2016 lost $100 million. Because it just wasn't a film people wanted. And then it happened with Star Wars. Particularly The Last Jedi was the straw that broke the camel's back. But there were actually complaints about Rogue One before it. But The Last Jedi was truly just beyond terrible. And what happened there was Episode 7 made close to $2 billion in Force Awakens. Episode 8 only just got over $1 billion. So Episode 8 made only just over half as much as The Force Awakens. But the real pain was in May last year when the standalone film Solo came out, which was directly boycotted and was already big inflation to its budget because of extensive reshoots, because Kathleen Kennedy, the head of Lucasfilm, is an idiot. So Solo ended up losing Disney a lot of money. They won't actually admit how much. But, we're talking at least 100 million losses.
Good.
So when you start to, when promoting an event agenda starts to really harm your core business. Now, with CBS, they wanted Star Trek to launch their new streaming service, CBS All Access.
Yeah.
So they came up with a whizzy idea of making this new Star Trek Discovery All Access only. So you have to subscribe to CBS All Access to watch it, or they license it onto other platforms like Netflix.
Yeah.
Now, the first series was a disaster. I literally can't give the DVDs or the merchandise away. People won't buy it. So Netflix funded most of that. Now CBS has had another roll of the dice, but this time we've had to fund this season entirely themselves. It doesn't look like it's going anywhere, and it looks like Star Trek Discovery is about to get cancelled. So that's a brand new flagship Star Trek show that looks better than any other Star Trek ever has before, being cancelled because its plots are infested with this SJW cultism.
Well, it seems to be the same. What's going on in Hollywood? It's the same. You look at the politics. The politicians are not reflecting on the people, and it's the same thing in Hollywood. They're not reflecting on the people as well. There's probably, they're so in their own little world. They think everyone thinks the same way as they do, and people that watch just, there's certain times I've seen in Hollywood where there's a PC moment thrown in there, and it just ruins it. It ruins the art.
It totally takes you out of the film.
Yeah, and you think you just put that in there. That's just so cheesy and rubbish and out of character and stupid.
Well, I want to say that there is another way of doing things, and there is another series which has been doing extremely well at showing this other way. Now, that series is called The Expanse, and it's set a couple of hundred years in the future, and it's about the power struggle between Earth, colonies on Mars, and colonies in the asteroid belt.
Yeah.
So it's telling a very realistic looking story of what humanity's power politics could look like in a couple of hundred years' time when we've moved out to start to colonize the solar system. And it does it. What's great about this is that you could not have a more diverse cast, right? Yeah. It's people, all sorts of ethnicities, men, women, the whole of humanity is on display in The Expanse. And do you know what it means?
What's that?
Absolutely nothing. It's irrelevant. It's not an issue. It's just people living and working in space.
Yeah.
So because it doesn't try and make a thing out of it, in fact the opposite, it completely ignores it and just gets on with showing characters behaving like their characters would in that situation for reasons that make sense without any tokenism whatsoever. It's about the most inclusive program on television, but without the ideology. So the idea that this is about sexism, oh my word, God, that times we've heard that rubbish. The original creator of Sydney, Doctor Who, a chap called Sidney Newman, supported the idea of making Doctor Who into a woman back in the 80s. Back when Tom Baker quit, when Peter Davison quit, and when Colin Baker quit, the British press ran stories about how the next Doctor Who was going to be a woman. And it is part of it has become established in the show that Time Lords can change their sex when they regenerate. Now, a lot of fans don't like that, but some fans aren't so bothered. I tend to think that it's a bit of a cheat, really, because all we've really done by making the Doctor female is robbed us of another female character. Because it could have been the Doctor's former companion Romana, who was another Time Lord who was female, or the Master's become female. There's another enemy called Varani out there who is female. In other words, by making the Doctor and the Master into women, they've only reduced a character there could have been another character. So I think it's a bit of a cheat, really.
Well, if it was done for creative, means someone had a creative, this would be really good, then it probably would be really good. But it isn't. It's political. The person who's putting the money, writing the checks, has said, we want a female Doctor Who because it's just politically correct.
I hoped it would be. At the time, I maintained a bit of optimism, and I thought, well, we've got to try something else. They want to try something else. Maybe they know what they're doing. But there are lots of ways in which a female Doctor could work. And I think if somebody had just followed the performance of Michelle Gomez the year before as Missy, they would have seen a lot about how to make a female Time Lord work. But what Jodie Whittaker has actually delivered is just terrible television. And a really weak performance, most unconvincing performance. So she's already winning the worst Doctor Who ever bowls, so because she doesn't convince as the Doctor.
Yeah.
And that's a really serious issue. She seems like she seems like she's a follower on her own show.
Yeah,
you know, she seems like a supporting background character. It's totally wrong, and a lack of authority and a lack of darkness, and just really doing a really bad David Tennant impression. And I don't even know if that's fair to say that. So, you know, big issues with performance here. But of course, because the character has become female, then you must be a misogynist racist to say such things.
Yeah. Oh, I don't care about that anymore. Just say it.
Yeah, well, I think everyone's got a huge dose of we don't care anymore, because if you just call everybody misogynists and sexists and racists, I know what they call them misandrist. Interesting, that, isn't it? You know, if you just call people those things, well, eventually they'll just give up and go, well, sod you then. I'll be a sexist then. Your program sucks.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, no, it's, and I think sometimes, you know, you've got to say the truth. You can't just keep being worried about whether someone's going to think you're racist or sexist or whatever it is. The bottom line is, as long as you think you're being diplomatic and fair and just expressing your view, who gives a crap what they think? I certainly don't. Maybe I'm of that age now where I just don't worry about it. You know, you've got.
Well, there is a big social reaction going on now. I wanted to address one thing here while talking to you, because there may be people listening to this. Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier. You're going, well, science fiction, low rubbish. What's it got to do with me? It's only bloody telly or movies. I don't care.
Yeah.
And I respect that view. You know, I do. I respect that view. I know those people to whom, you know, science fiction fandom or computer games, which is another area which has suffered greatly with this agenda. You know, they're stupid things that don't matter, and they're more interested in proper politics and whatnot. Well, I want to point out that this is proper politics. For one thing, the BBC is currently talking about moving to the European Union after Brexit.
Good riddance.
So, well, yes, good riddance. Except that, you know, when they have really exposed themselves as fake news enemy of the people, we should be caring about what they're putting out through their programming, because it is part of the same thing. And at the same time, a successful cultural pushback against these agendas will help a more common sense attitude more widely throughout society. Whereas if these cult ideas continue to be shoved down people's throats, then, you know, you're fighting an uphill battle as these things are pushed the other way. So for groups that want to ban the BBC, bring the BBC to account for its behaviour, the BBC licence fee, all of those sort of issues, the anger, and the anger is very real, and the determination to get something done about it, which is now come to the fore with the majority of Doctor Who fans, definitely not something that should be ignored. You know, and that they should be seen as two parts of the same reaction, both the political and the cultural. So, you know, I've always felt that culture is very, very important. So I'm glad to be doing my part for it.
Well, they're no longer educating people. They're teaching people. Indoctrinating. Yeah, that's a better word. But anyway, we're getting to that sort of time now. Is there anything you'd like to say while we wrap this up? The usual promotional stuff, Paul. Aslans Army Facebook group, Facebook page, MeWe group. Come and find us. You'll love it. It's lovely. And also the Not My Doctor Who HQ Facebook page, which I also have a hand in now. And we're going to be doing a lot with that in the year ahead. Unfortunately, the BBC have confirmed, and it's already being filmed, that there is going to be a season 12 with the same team of Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker. That's actually filming now. So we're looking at a campaign of about a year's length, so that when season 12 hits the rocks the same way that season 11 has, and with all the damage which is going to be done to the DVD sales and everything else over the next year, because people simply don't want this shite, you know, I think we're looking at a win in about a year's time, whereas America is starting to come into its wins now, because this started for them a little bit earlier than it started for us. Yeah. Well, that's definitely going to be something I'm going to keep an eye on, and it's definitely something that's very relevant, and I don't think people should underrate it. It's something that's very, very powerful in our society, and we've talked a lot about culture today from the Islamic situation with the populist parties, and very much into entertainment, which is for a lot of people something that really indoctrinates them, even if they're not aware of it. It's something worth thinking about.
Here's an example we can use of that. Last year, or I think actually the year before, the BBC produced a 3-part docudrama, very good it was too, called Three Girls, which was about the rape gangs. I think it was Rotherham, might have been Rochdale. I have to remind myself which town it was set in. But that drama, and putting that drama on and talking about those issues, was then directly cited as the reason why that chap, I think his name was Darren Osborne, drove from Wales to London and pulled off that van attack outside of a mosque. So, what they're trying to suggest is that by trying to talk about the issues in society, we risk making hate incidents happen. And that is a non-starter.
Yeah.
That is a non-starter. That is a very harmful indeed. And a pushback against that is essential. So we will get to the point where we can face up to having an honest conversation about ourselves with our own society, and I think we'll be much better for it.
Yeah. Well, I'm totally for that myself, and that is all we got time for. Thanks for coming on, John. It's always really cool to have you on. And
pleasure.
We'll make sure it's not as long next time.
Listeners, nice to be heard by you all again. I'll be back sooner this time, I expect.
Yeah, brilliant.